So again, in your goals, your mental health, our personal relationships, our physical health, we have to look at these, how they all come together to put us in those building blocks to go then plow ahead if we are going to, as the goal, start a business, as a goal, change in terms of career, as a goal, try to get in terms of some educational milestones you're talking about, being a pilot, being a doctor, so on and so forth. You have to put these building blocks together.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to another show of Ascending Thoughts, the show where we discuss the issues of today and the strategies of how to overcome them. My name is Brian. I'm accompanied by Mr. Will Rogers, the voice of reason in these tumultuous times. We're starting off the new year, and just wanted to welcome everybody to the show. Well,
good afternoon, everyone. Our neighbors out in the our metahood, our neighborhood in the metaverse, and look forward to starting off and kicking off a bright and prosperous New Year 2023.
Yeah, so Will, let's start right off here with the topic of the day. I wanted to speak about some goals for the future and for 2023. Can you just give us a brief rundown of some of the basics that our viewers can be thinking about?
Well, basically, in terms of what in terms of philosophy and what we want to share with our neighbors out there is how to basically ascend to greater heights in our own personal and professional lives, and also to be impactful to society as a whole. As we've gotten to the end of the year, as we've had a number of personal discussions, you and I, and as we start the year off, I think that it's absolutely, in terms of critical, and one of the most beneficial tasks that we can do in ourselves is kind of get into a process of how we reflect back of, what kind of goals that we set for ourselves. How did we fare? Look at it, objectively, and then kind of to set ourselves on the right path for the coming year is what goals that we want to basically pursue. A lot of us, in terms of as people, we feel that we kind of live, in terms of day to day and see what's thrown at us. But if you take and adopt kind of the philosophies and the principles of what we try to teach, is you want to be purposeful, intentful, and set in path and motion of what you're trying to achieve. You are going to basically assail and ascend and grow as a person, and in terms of not just in your own personal but your professional, and what you'll see in your financial life, and also to be a positive force out there for society as a whole.
Yeah, and you spoke upon intent for these goals, and what can the viewers do coming into this new year of 2023? Everybody's talking about a New Year's resolution, wanting to maybe get a little bit healthier after the holidays, things like that. What can the viewers do personally to go about that?
We all as people have different goals, what we call things we like to have. For example, we go through our basic list. I would like to make more money or have less debt, what we call a financial objective. We can have in terms of an objective of the emotions. I would like to have a relationship, a loving romance. We could have a personal experience where I would like to go in terms of and go on a great hike out to Yosemite. And as well as we would talk about, I would like to get a degree, a specific tangible in terms of in that. And then we talk about in personal health, I would like to get, whether it's my blood pressure down, lose weight. We use in terms of the things of but we're not making the connection to action.
Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to separate out there, because when we are going into how these end result objectives, whether it's to make more money, to improve my health, whether it is to lose weight, lower my cholesterol, blood pressure, and things like that, we have to turn that objective into specific actions that we can do, because there's things that we can do that we control, and things that are part of chance of just how
how the world tends
fares for itself.
Yeah.
But when we adopt into the solace and personally, like I can be mindful of what I'm going to eat. I'm going to be mindful of my daily exercise habits. When we go in terms of impersonal, I'm like, well, if I'm wanting to, I've been feeling in terms of lonely and I would like to have some sort of a companionship and relationship, people need to make actions of trying to put themselves out there and see people and date and things like that. My point and takeaway is we want to convert our aspiration, which is that end objective that we're looking into, specific actions that can lead us down to that path.
Okay.
Then as we're getting to the year, we're surveying are we meeting them? Are we falling short? Are we surpassing them? Because that's how you're setting things into motion. We're trying to convert these aspirations and incorporate into our lives a set of daily habits so that they happen naturally without giving much thought. So in other words, if I'm incorporating specifically, if my main objectives in this new year is I need to look at my health measures, I need to basically, in terms of my sense of my mental health, that I'm feeling lonely and isolated and out there. I'm looking at more of a bigger pressure is that maybe there's a financial aspect, or I'm putting out there in terms of maybe there's a sense of accomplishment, like education. When we put all those out there, now we want to break it in there. What are we doing in terms of in our actual task to get down and lay into motion to achieving?
Yeah, just setting that roadmap and incrementally, just like you're going on a road trip, every 100 miles or so.
Correct.
Stopping, taking a break, relaxing, surveying. Hey, are we on the right track? Where can we go? Do we have to divert measures this way or continue on our path to our destination?
One of the things that we learn with any sort of goal setting that we set for ourselves is many goals are basically, long term, meaning that it's not achieved in a day and it's not achieved in a week. What that means is we have to give continuous effort, we have to persevere. And so the psychological disconnect where we have is in terms of people is we feel that it's so distant and we psychologically create a lot of pressure for ourselves as opposed to finding ways to incorporate in our normal daily habits. For example, we don't think about breathing, it happens. We don't think about walking, it happens. We don't think a lot of times about eating. If we can convert some of the things of where we're trying to go into that form of automatic and living in terms of life, we are much further ahead to achieving our success. But because psychologically we're like, oh shoot, if I'm a type of person that I don't do any activity and my goal is to go to the gym 3 times a week, there's a huge psychological aspect
and a burden
that you're trying to overcome. But once you've already gotten in there that you're working out 3 times a week, it's already incorporated. It feels like it's breathing.
Yeah. It feels, doing something over and over, habitual becomes normal.
Correct. So that's why when you're hearing about in these cases, we're sit in amazement that you hear about an 80-year-old who participates in a 10K or this and that as though it's amazing, extraordinary. You have to look at from the standpoint, it's not amazing and extraordinary because they're already doing it and it's become habitual. But for us, because our context is most people are not getting any sort of movement whatsoever, it seems unattainable.
Taboo, too.
Not just taboo, what we see is that it's so hard and challenging and unattainable. So it's overcoming in terms of, in the psychological aspect, we want to incorporate different activities and behaviors into our daily routine. But getting started is always the hardest part.
Yeah.
So when we take education, for example, when we look at to go and get a degree or learn a new skill, and as you've mentioned to me, your long-term aspiration of being a pilot, there could be this long road to get to that endpoint, but if you're breaking it down in those micro aspects that you're doing within your day and weeks, that, okay, yes, you're going to have a full-time job to finance to get to your end goal, but to stay on that path, there's aspects of understanding aeronautics. There's aspects of looking at what's going on in new technology. There's other also courses. You're breaking it down to, it doesn't seem as Herculean of a task.
And being able to adapt to that ever-changing landscape where I want to be in the future.
Correct.
And all the little tasks that one does to make up, the full-time job which we're currently in.
Correct.
To encompass being a well-rounded individual, and once again to ascend and sail to those long-term goals.
And to going and hitting that of what we call the ultimate end objective of getting a pilot's license, and then eventually allowing you to catapult into a career of being a pilot. Again, the takeaway is we have to break down these aspects into actions of today and this week that we can incorporate in our daily lives.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem as though it's as arduous. It seems as normal as though it's breathing. Because when you hear it over and over, you will hear from medical professionals, you'll hear from all kinds. You only need 20, 30 minutes a day of exercise to get some physical and health benefit, which doesn't seem as a lot of time.
Out of 24 hours, yeah.
That is correct. So think about it. If we were to use that analogy in studying into a pilot, what can you do in 30 minutes a day or an hour to get you to the goal of a long term of becoming a pilot? Or someone who wants to become a nurse, wants to become a doctor, wants to start a business. My point is, many of these long-term aspirations have various similarities in that if we're incorporating into our daily routine, they don't see so far away. And we can get down the path. You may not get there today, you may not get there this week, but you're moving and making forward progress, as opposed to looking at year in and year out. Well, I dreamed about being a pilot, but what did you do to get down the path? And that is in terms of the key.
Yeah, and I think that example is great, and it hit the nail on the head. And it's tough being someone of my generation with technology and coming up, being able to grow up and see the iPhone evolve, see all the social media evolve, and how everything is just instantaneous.
The challenge that your generation has versus other generations is that there is what I would call an oversaturation of distraction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All generations, even going back to the beginning of time, have always had distraction. The difference that you have now is that it's just nonstop, and it comes from so many different angles. Because when you're talking about in times of more of an era when we weren't in an always on kind of culture, when you're looking at social media, there was a time that you can turn things off. So long-term success, and one of, as I was always raised and mentored, is required two specifics that you have to have. Is you have to have commitment and you have to have focus. You have to channel those two. Now, commitment and focus has nothing to do with intelligence. So you don't have to score a perfect score in the SATs. You don't have to have an absolute, high IQ score, but it is a personal attribute. And also, too, by the way, there is no DNA or genes that say that one person comes out of the womb better than the other in terms of the measure of commitment and focus. But when you look at those who are Olympic athletes, you look at those who end up, forming, in terms of companies, people who end up becoming great, virtuosos in terms of pianists, or in terms of ballet, to those who,
the
highly skilled in terms of, when you look at those who are in the excellent tier, have high degrees of commitment and focus. And it is a mindset, it is an attitude, and lots of people have commitment. commitment a lot of times is an issue. Look at all the people who are going to pursue higher education. We have hundreds of students. It's not that they're not committed, but the challenge is what really separates people is focus. And focus is so hard because when you're looking at an oversaturation of whether it's social media, you have different messages and what society is telling you what is right and wrong. And we have a natural, innate psychological feeling of wanting to fit in. And you're having all those directions. People underestimate the power of culture given in our upbringing and trying to be accepted from within our family and our peer groups. Focus is extremely difficult. And focus a lot of times requires us to go against the grain. Focus sometimes when you know what you need to do to get ahead and ascend may mean you have to do things that other people may ridicule you, may bully you, may ostracize you, and say that you do not want to do. And that's why focus is so difficult because we as social creatures want to gain acceptance.
Yeah.
And there is a natural self-regulation that goes on within society, and that is, you notice, we call it a crabs in the bucket effect, that when one crab is trying to crawl its way out, why does the other pack try to pull it down? Psychologically, this tends to happen within a lot of people because of our innate desire of we don't want to be that black sheep. We want to be fit in and exist. That's why when you look at it and you understand that personal struggle, the focus piece is the hardest. Not that they didn't have the commitment, but to be able to focus and channel and persevere through.
Interesting. I wanted to cover more about that in the focus and speak about moving on to, we have our goal. How can we measure that goal, let's say in 6 months, 12 months, and maintaining that focus for those time periods? How can we maintain that?
Well, as we get into that part, as we're measuring in the right intervals, when you're looking at a month or, some people like to look at the quarter.
3
we
months.
use the term in Wall Street, what we did in first quarter, second quarter, or we do a clip kind of midpoint halfway through year. We have to step back in a minute and we have to create the conditions to allow us to be successful. And when I talk about the conditions to be successful, we have to look at the building blocks. And there's so often that's overlooked is one, our personal mental health. Number two, our physical health in terms of in going into that. And also two, our support group. So in these building blocks, and the reason why you've heard me in numerous conversations is these building blocks are absolutely critical to allow us to build the endurance and also to that group who we can go to. We need a support group to continue to endure along, because when you are there standing all alone on that long trek, we wear down, we get isolated, we start to question it in terms of our resolve, our self-esteem, our personal mental health. That's where you're seeing depression and all these issues start to foment. And so again, we are too, and especially in your generation here, we are too isolated. Yes, technology allows us to Snapchat with our friends. Yes, it allows us to stay connected via Instagram. But I do question, are you truly connected? Because we as people are biologically wired through thousands of years to have this, what we call intimate, close personal connection. Technology makes it nice that we can put cute emojis. It allows us to communicate in a way, but it's not intimate and we don't feel connected and validated and heard and understood. And you have to, if you're wanting to get on this path, have that building block there. Number 2 is you really have to invest in your health. I cannot overemphasize this enough. As you've seen, Brian, I am in a very grueling, strenuous profession. And the amount of stress that the tax profession endures out there is,
incredible.
unfathomable. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But if you don't watch your blood pressure, you're not exercising, you're not decompressing, and as well as eating the right, and all of that, you asked me, William, you have a personal trainer. William, you're watching in terms of your eating. It's like you're training for an Ironman athlete. An Ironman event it's part of those components to allow me, because this is a very cerebral, cognitive type of business, and it's food. Exercise allows the oxygen and blood flow. They all go hand in hand. We can't compartmentalize these things. So again, in your goals, your mental health, our personal relationships, our physical health, we have to look at these, how they all come together to put us in those building blocks to go then plow ahead if we are going to, as the goal, start a business, as a goal, change in terms of career, as a goal, try to get in terms of some educational milestones you're talking about, being a pilot, being a doctor, so on and so forth. You have to put these building blocks together. We can't disconnect.
Yeah, and those are the physical, the mental, and the community aspect. Those are really the foundations of the building, which are the most strongest.
And I am so flabbergasted when I speak with young people and a lot of people who nowadays really diminish the importance of a relationship. You're hearing a lot of people in their own personal romantic lives, oh, I'm not interested in that, as though it's not a meaningful thing. All I'm just saying is that, God, look at sociological and anthropology going back thousands of years. Humans are not designed to be isolated.
Right.
And when we talk about in the need and nurturing of in a personal romantic relationship, people are afraid of in terms of heartbreak, but it's in our biological wiring to be with someone, to be supported, to be validated. And I'm telling you, again, as an advisor, as a consultant, when you have someone in your corner, your enthusiasm, your concentration, your focus is going to be there to propel you to success.
And it's
a necessary ingredient versus someone saying, as I hear all the time, I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. I all respect in terms of people's idea and notion of self-reliance and wanting to pull themselves up from their bootstraps. But I just want to tell people out there, and having done it, is don't kid yourselves when you hear all these stories about these people who started from rags to riches or pulled themselves up from bootstraps. No one ever did it all alone. You have to have a support group of people. And it's not just, in terms of one person. It is, in terms of, it's the group of friends, it's mentors. You have to have in a network, your personal relationships. If you have in a personal, committed relationship, whether it's your wife or a longtime significant partner that's supportive and understanding, it's all those. But we do live in a society of personal achievement, but we don't give enough credit and attention to all the people who are there. When we see the Super Bowl this year, we are going to hail the MVP, right? But you don't realize it's a team sport. Again, life is like that. Whether it's your parents, it's your close friends, it's your advisors, your mentors, it's the people who is your personal close relationship. Again, you need all that to assail.
You could, that was a perfect example on the football team. You could be that MVP star quarterback, but guess what?
But you wouldn't have gotten there without all those people, but they are the ones who don't get the awards.
That offensive coordinator calling the plays to help you.
And so all of our neighbors out there in terms of the audience, I understand how we are in terms of highly independent people, but you're really missing out in the absolute currency in gold is the more people you have and you have someone close to you, the higher you're going to sail.
Yeah, and with small businesses, the
Yeah.
synergy that you always mention in
And
office
I
of combining
I'm just going to
together.
tell you, quite honestly, one of the regrets that I have looking back on my life is just being in terms of so isolated. I lacked a lot of personal, social, in terms of skills. I felt uncomfortable. I wasn't the most sociable type of person. But when I look back and what's maybe held me back from more success that I could have
Uh-huh.
had is if I had better social skills.
Hmm.
Then I would have had people to, when I was, feeling down, I could have gone to confide in
Hmm.
that could have, given me support, as well as not only that, business opportunities,
Yeah.
because there's an old saying, and people really have to understand this. It's not what you know, but it's who you know.
Hmm.
And it is the one takeaway that will always, always endure. Yes, there's LinkedIn. Yes, there's all these different beautiful apps, but people aren't comfortable with strangers. When you're looking at new hiring, when you're looking at, in terms of trying to go find someone as you need an attorney, you need a realtor. We're
Hmm.
always looking for that recommendation. We're not
Hmm.
necessarily just freely Googling and looking for a random
5-star
stranger.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, that's our psychology, and I'm telling you,
Hmm.
we are really underestimating, and your generation is really going to miss out the value of a network. And the network is not this; it's
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and the more you go in depth about that, the more I see that over the last five or so years, and then of course, with COVID and everything
Of
going
course.
on, and
And I'm also,
you know,
Brian, reflecting in my career in the last 25 years, if there's something I could have done better,
hmm.
is really if I had better in terms of social skills and not being
Hmm.
so socially aloof and introverted. I'm just telling you, that
Hmm.
network is the difference when, we use the flying analogy. If I want to be in a single engine turboprop
Hmm.
versus a jumbo jet, and that difference of altitude
Hmm.
that's how powerful a network can have. And I've
Yeah.
seen it from the different business clients I've had, from people who can grow like this versus people you're just puddling
Uh-huh.
around. You enjoy the
Hmm.
sky, but there's a difference when you can really
Yeah.
soar.
When you yeah. Yeah.
And when a lot of people feel that how we're progressing in terms of our lives, that's the
Hmm.
difference in the ability of ascending.
Yeah.
That's the power of that network.
Hmm. Yeah, and that so many great points. The power of the network, and then commitment and focus. I think that those are really great points to finish off on. And as the show's coming down to a close, I know time is of the essence
Yeah, we
now.
will talk about in our future broadcasts about you need to have the lofty goal. And
Yeah.
what I
Hmm.
like to, and when I learned in terms of, studying my MBA, we use the term big, hairy, audacious
Hmm.
goal. And in the power and virtue of having the big, grandiose goals, because there's a sort of kind of like a magnetic kind of response when we think about in our as people that inspire us, putting a
Hmm.
man on the moon, running a sub 4 minute mile, finding a cure for cancer. There's a psychological impact and inspiration of doing what you can't do, what can't be done. And we'll
Hmm.
talk about in future broadcasts the value in terms of that
Okay.
and how it serves in our overall when we're designing goals. Because there's a nice goal when people put and they tick off, pay off a credit card,
Yeah.
lose 10 pounds, what we call little checkbox
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah.
But the difference between a big, audacious goal
Uh-huh.
and the value that it serves,
Hmm.
because to serve in terms of our own nature and our spirit and our soul as people, the need to
Hmm.
transform and to basically, uplift ourselves to something that could be just
Hmm.
totally monumental
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lifetime type of goal, what we call is that lofty goal.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, the evolution of you as a person here and looking towards the future. How can you get to evolve to that new person per se,
Correct,
and what
correct.
are
And
the
the
measurable things?
relevance of establishing
Hmm.
and finding out what is the right lofty goal to focus on that
Yeah.
really speaks to who we are as a
Hmm.
person, and if we get there or fall short,
Hmm.
how it would fundamentally radically transform our lives.
Yeah, yeah. And how to look at that, because there's always going to be steps forward and there's always going to be steps back.
Right. But what you do learn in terms of an ultimate success, it's not always about achievements. It's about the adventure and the journey. I was raised, and as I grew up, and amongst a lot of people, as we all want to be professional athletes. How many people can play professionally? Less than 1%, right? But you still go out there every day in terms of and try to get to, the highest levels. But you think of in terms of all those people that you speak to, the fact that you went out there and tried versus all those people who talked themselves out of it. Think of it, whatever their pursuit, that whether they became a coach and that they stayed in terms of in sports, or people went off into another career totally unrelated. The skills, the learning, the self-esteem of how transformative it is to go after the lofty goal.
The progress that you make as a human being,
correct,
is really what the proof in the pudding.
Correct. And understanding is how it's part of our own DNA and necessary to go and unlock that, because we all as people are looking for that inspiration to essentially catapult us.
Yeah, and that'll be great to speak about in the future shows. Once again, time is coming to a close. Will, if you'd like to present anything to finalize the show here today.
Yeah, just want to basically wish and bless our neighbors out there a prosperous 2023, and we look forward to basically, providing you with ascending thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds good. Once again, my name is Brian. I'm with Mr. Will Rogers, and it was a great time, great show, and looking forward to everybody next time. Thanks.